Bienvenidos, Fright fans. Welcome to the horror show. I am Jaime Fuego.
I'm Cecil Laird.
And we are doing a review of a film that we got to see at the International Horror and Sci-Fi Film Festival 2018, y'all, which takes place during and in conjunction with the Phoenix Film Festival. We're talking The Ranger today, which was only screened one night, and there was only a couple films that were shown just once. Everything else was like 2 to 3 times, so this was like one-stop shop where you were able to check this out, and, you know, it's very punk rock, which is one thing that I enjoyed about it, but it's not without its flaws. But I'm going to give a shout out to Jen Wexler, the writer and the director of this, who had produced stuff like Darling before. We were trying to get a interview together, and you know, apparently she wasn't at the festival, and so that was a little miscommunication, but we are still in talks to do a Skype interview and discuss the film in a little bit more detail, which is cool. So as a whole, if we're going to talk about just, it's called The Ranger. It's basically about a bunch of punks who go and they're like hiding out in the forest, and lo and behold, a ranger goes and starts terrorizing them. However, there is a history with this ranger and one of the punks, and yeah, things get gory and crazy, but it ended up being, for me, it had a lot more character development and like story, genuine like sadness and just things like that than I was anticipating necessarily. So that was one of the redeeming qualities of this film. I thought it was going to be by the book slasher, but the villain had personality, which I thought was interesting, and I was not expecting that. And yeah, just his connection with this one character in the film was the most intriguing aspect of it, at least for me. What did you think?
So, here's the thing. I went into it not necessarily realizing it was going to be as music and punk driven kind of as it was. Like, that was interesting to me. Yeah. However, while he was good, I was not a fan of the Ranger's character that much.
Really?
Yeah. He kind of, there was something about him that just, I don't know if it was the way he was speaking or something like that. It just kind of bummed me out whenever he talked.
He reminded me of Putty from Seinfeld.
Yeah, a little bit.
He totally reminded me of. He was also the Tick.
He wasn't as menacing, but I guess that's the point. The menace comes from the fact that he's not menacing. Like, he's unexpectedly menacing, but I just didn't find him as such, although I could see how other people do. Yeah. But the overall, I thought the movie was well done, and there were some some cool stuff in it. But overall, I just wasn't super like it wasn't one of my tops for the festival. But it's, I would say it's in my top 5. Okay. But it just wasn't in my top 3, 2, or 1 because. Yeah, it's just some of the characters didn't quite work that well for me in it.
Well, and that was where I was initially upset, but I was like, okay, I knew asshole punk kids just like that. When I was coming up in the scene, when I was 18, 19 years old, and I was just getting out of high school, and I was starting to, party and drink and do stupid shit like that, I knew kids who acted just like that. So that's where I was like, oh, they're so annoying, they're irritating, they're stupid, they're doing the dumbest crap. But I knew kids that were just like that. So that was the one thing where initially I was like, oh, this is terrible, but since I knew people like that, I guess I was less judgmental. But if we're going to segue into story, essentially we see a young girl who is like sitting with this ranger looking over a cliff, and something terrible has transpired, and then they go back and like he makes her a sandwich, and they're kind of processing what happened, but they don't completely reveal what it was, and then he's taken away by the authorities. Despite being a ranger, the police come for him. Right. He's taken away. Then we flash forward to her, grown up kind of. I mean, she's like late teens, early 20s, and she's totally different. She's got like the piercings and the leather and pink hair and all this other stuff. And I'm trying to remember the name of the character. I want to say Claire, maybe, but if I'm wrong, sure, I feel like a dumbass. But nonetheless, I really enjoyed just the vulnerability and the fact that she just really wasn't completely down with everything that everybody was doing, but she was kind of going with it. She's involved with a dude who's like flirting with the friend. They've got these weird, and it was almost like either angel dust or something. I don't know. They had some weird name for it in this, but it's like pink blow. Right. Not Pink Panther. So it's not cocaine. But yeah, it's I don't know. They go on the run after their punk bar gets, raided by cops and stuff. I had a very SLC punk vibe at times, and I loved this movie. Okay. Loved that movie in particular. So for me, this was in a lot of ways mixing SLC punk with like, I don't know, like a Cabin in the Woods kind of vibe. And those two movies, having the fact that I love them, I was cool with that. So they go on the run after some stuff goes down that I don't want to reveal at this particular punk show. They go up north to presumably more rural New York, upstate and stuff, and they're hiding out at this cabin that her uncle owned, and her friends just start doing dumb stuff, and they're like trashing the area and stuff. And they run into a ranger. Sorry, they run into this ranger that she had the history with that you saw at the beginning of the film, and from there it just goes into him implementing and him imposing his will on these punks that are pretty much trashing the
teaching
forest.
them who's boss and why you can't do certain things in the forest because you're not respecting the forest and things like that.
And they totally were. They're like spray painting trees and starting fires not in the fire pit and just basically being asshole punks is essentially the best way to put it. So,
but so as far as the story goes, it was it was your basic setup. It was kids going into the woods and a slasher coming after them.
Yeah.
It was done a little bit better because there were the pre-existing relationships between one of the people and the actual killer,
and that's
really that.
That's really the only thing that added an additional level of interest to me, because otherwise it would have been just totally by the books. But it was their history between this one character and the ranger that added a layer of intrigue that wouldn't have necessarily been there. If not for that plot point, I don't think this movie would have been as interesting as it was, at least for me.
No, I agree with you, and I still feel like, I don't know. I feel like we were a little light on the kills too.
Yeah, and it took a while to get there.
It did. But yeah, the ranger just got kind of annoying. Like, but he wasn't bad. He was good at what he did. But he was just he was so much like Patrick Warburton.
Is that the name of the actor?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was.
As we segue into acting, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, he was just a little bit over the top, a little bit too much of the time for me. Even though he was playing it understated, his understatement was still over the top.
Because this is presumably in the 80s.
Presumably.
They didn't like clear cut nail it out, but I mean, yeah.
But that doesn't excuse acting.
No,
but anyway, I mean, well, let's go ahead, Fuego. What should we lead into next then?
Well, I mean, finishing up the acting, obviously, I thought the young girl who played like the lead of sorts, the final girl, as you could say. I could check on my phone to double check her name, but I'm not going to do that. Miss Pink Hair, as we shall call her. I thought she was great, man. I honestly really identified with her. I sympathized with her. I felt for her. And she had an interesting arc of where you realize like some of the rage inside as they finally got to it near the end. And, the fact that he was like, oh, no, you're a wolf, like deep inside, you seem so timid and tame and so on. But you are like, you're a wild animal, deep down inside of yourself. And, that it took a while for her to embrace it, I guess, but when it got there, especially in the third act, she had some hardcoreness to her.
Yeah.
But hey, being in those pits and stuff, I mean, come on, hardcore punks, man. That is the one thing that I'm gonna say I didn't like as much about the movie is the fact that the other friends were definitely written to be like the stereotypical punks, so to speak, and I'm not saying that it was without a lack of accuracy or anything like that, but I was still annoyed by those kids in my circle of friends when I was 19, so the characters did annoy me in this film too, so I'm not far off from you in that. It was just like, oh, it's just like real life. There are just dumb asshole punk kids that just want to trash things and don't care about much of anything.
And they're less fun to watch.
No.
You're just like, oh, these douchebags. Especially as I'm getting older, I have less and less tolerance for characters like that, as I find.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I did like the girl with the blue hair, though. I thought she was the wild card that ended up with them because they stole her vehicle, basically.
Right.
And so she ends up there with them, and I guess they had to have another injection of estrogen in this film to balance things out. It couldn't be just one chick and the two guys who were the couple. Well, there was the two guys who were the couple, and
right.
But bottom line, I didn't think all of the other actors were bad necessarily. They were serviceable enough, but I was most impressed with the acting of the ranger and the girl that he had the connection with that went back. So
all right,
yeah. Jumping into what else? I mean, obviously cinematography and effects and stuff. The gore wasn't there till later. It took a while to get there.
Right.
But, I did enjoy, like, the bear trap scene. I thought that was cool. And there's a few other... I mean, there was something with a wolf where
messed up, that scene.
That was a very messed up scene, actually. And there's some stuff that happens off screen that I would have preferred to have seen on screen, like where the animal attack aspect happens and stuff. But you know, and they used a real wolf. You know, they didn't go with CGI or anything like that, like we've seen in certain films. Cinematography, I mean, it's nice looking. Upstate New York is where I presume they filmed this. They said it in the credits below. You know, that's why I actually stuck around, because I was curious. Did they film it in, like, Toronto, or did they actually film it in New York? And they did film it in the state of New York, which is cool. So, you know, beautiful forestry and whatnot, and some of the scenes where, you know, like where in the third act where they're going up the tower, I thought that was well shot and pretty cool. But, yeah, so, I mean, Jen Wexler and her cinematographer did an awesome job, I think, at least as far as the look of the film, despite some of the problems that I had with a little bit of the acting and a little bit of the scripting. What's your thoughts on the look of this movie?
No, the look was great. Yeah. I thought it was really well handled, and you know, it lent itself to the story for sure.
Very much.
But so it wasn't distracting, which is nice. You know,
which can happen when you have a jarring visual aspect that doesn't correlate very well.
And unfortunately, that can happen a lot with movies that end up in festivals.
Yeah.
But this honestly just felt like a precursor to what could very well be a large-scale release of, you know, like I could see this being done with a $3 million budget and being put out in the theaters and stuff like that. Do you have any idea what this one ran?
I'm not sure what it ran for, but it didn't look cheap. That's the best way that we can describe it. We watch a lot of really low budget stuff that is deservedly low budget, and you know, this looked like it could be released limited theatrically and make some money. I mean, this could play at the Film Bar here in Phoenix, or you know, various other places, maybe even like Harkins does like the smaller horror films at Arizona Mills sometimes, and it could end up there. I mean, seriously, they did Train to Busan there. They've done things like that. So I could see this in theaters, and I think people would take note and be interested.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. So but I agree with the gore. We didn't. Let me just talk about the gore real quick. No, I thought it was nice. I wish there was more of it, honestly. You know, because we did see a lot in movies like Revenge and Downrange.
It was almost a desensitization. We're like,
it was.
Where's the gore? Where's the money?
But I'm always, you know, I'm always a fan of the gore, so I thought that was a little lacking in this one to be a slasher. But, you know, especially the stuff happening off screen, like you said, I think that...
He wasn't your typical slasher, though, which was a weird thing about it.
No, but still, I don't know. Yeah. I feel like there were opportunities. But still, nonetheless, So go ahead. You lead off the music discussion.
The music was awesome, man. And the funny thing was, I don't think it was, as opposed to like SLC Punk, where it was lots of the 80s period specific stuff, I don't think they really used a lot of 80s stuff. I think it was like current punk bands in the scene that do that throwback like production, because I sat and I watched all of the scrolling credits and stuff because I was curious about the music that was utilized. But you know, whether for my undiscerning ear, because you know my punk goes as far as the 80s shizzle, you know, Dead Kennedys and Bad Religion and Minor Threat and you know, stuff like that. But it still felt appropriate. It was very noisecore, hardcore kind of stuff, and it fit the setting. I know you were kind of surprised that they went so heavy-handedly with it at times.
Yeah.
But, you know, there were others, especially once the killing finally started transpiring, where they did segue into, like, the almost It Follows, like, Carpenter kind of
I like that stuff.
And that stuff I thought worked really well once the kills stared happening.
I agree with that stuff, but, the other stuff I don't remember as much, so I guess that tells you what I thought of it.
Well,
I didn't dislike it.
Low production, noisecore, shouty, hardcore, you know? Yeah. And I was always a West Coast, more melodic hardcore guy, whereas, you know, this being from New York, that was more like noisecore, beat your chest hardcore type vibe, and that was never as much my scene. But I know a lot of people enjoy it, stuff like Gnostic Front and whatnot. So as a whole, I did like this movie quite the bit.
Yeah.
I didn't love it. It didn't get into that territory, but I mean, once again, it was the punk vibe, but more so than anything else, the weird just kind of relationship between this main character and the weird ranger guy. I bought into it, and it added...
I feel like we've seen something like it before, but I'm hard-pressed to figure out where. So I guess that means it works as unique, but at the same time, there is that degree of familiarity
well,
I can't quite place.
It just added more drama and character development than I was expecting. I thought it was going to be like a silent ranger killer going around tearing through these kids.
I did think that too.
That's what I thought it was going to be, and that is not what this movie was at all. Totally different.
No,
so
that part at least is refreshing.
Yeah.
Because he was a very in-your-face sort of killer where he
had
like literally
personality.
talked to and almost taunted every single one of his victims.
True.
So
Yeah.
that is cool to see because it's not usual. It is usually just a silent pick off.
Which is kind of boring.
So I
if
do
you ask
applaud
me.
that. I do applaud that approach.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall I was just kind of I'm in the B territory on it.
Oh yeah,
You
same
know what I
here.
mean?
Same here.
So
yeah,
that's definitely a good review.
No,
you know,
it
it's
is,
worth
yeah.
seeing for sure.
Yeah,
just
especially-
didn't knock my socks off like I guess I was hoping it was going to.
Yeah.
But you know, maybe I'm setting too high of expectations for movies.
The burden of expectation. As
Yeah,
I think
I really
mentioned
did like
on-
that trailer. We
That was
did
an awesome
that trailer reaction, and
Yeah,
we were
with
both
Mercer and David.
all on board, really. So yeah, it just didn't quite live up to what I was hoping, but it was not bad. It was definitely serviceable and enjoyable enough that I would recommend it to people to watch at least once.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you, I mean, if you're down with the melding of SLC punk and like, you know, just the cabin fever, you know, just cabin tale. I'm not going to say cabin in the woods like I did before because that was so insanely meta. That's not really what this embodied. But
Right.
I mean, yeah, SLC punk taking place in the New York woods. Yeah, I don't know, and there's a killer above. So, but I did like this movie, and I recommend if you like the slasher genre to check it out as well. It's got a little more meat to it to chew on. It's not super kiddie pool surface level. So,
All right. Well, there you go, guys. That's going to do it for our review of the movie The Ranger, straight out of the 2018 International Horror and Sci-Fi Film Festival. Special thanks to Monty from said festival, as well as Patrick from Allied and Jason from the Phoenix Film Festival. We appreciate you all for allowing us to come and cover this event. Yet again, it's an amazing event, and we saw more movies than ever this year. So that's why you guys are going to get over 30 episodes of coverage out of this event this year.
mind blown.
Yeah.
It was an amazing experience and one that I'm super stoked that we were able to take part in. So.
Absolutely. So thanks again. I've been Cecil Laird.
Gracias, I've been Jaime Fuego.
And remember,
Stay
stay scared.
Wait.
You messed it up.